Welcome to Season 3 of the Knack for Business podcast. Over 350 episodes strong, we're here to ignite your entrepreneurial spirit with fresh insights, networking gems, and creative strategies that elevate your game.
So, question to the audience, how do you actually scale your business without losing control or missing your shot at a successful exit? And James, our guest today, will be sharing real-world strategies for scaling your company, whether through organic growth, acquisition, or roll-up strategies, while building operational resilience and keeping your long-term exit goals in sight. So, our guest, James Mackenzie from Purecolo. He's joining us for a second round here on the Knack for Business podcast. James is a serial entrepreneur who's founded or co-founded over half a dozen multi-million-dollar companies since 2010 across a wide range of sectors. His ventures have earned accolades from Best of Business, Fastest Growing Company, Bootstrap Awards, formerly the CEO of Granite Networks, acquired by Rogers in 2013, interim CEO of Rock Garden Medicinals, acquired by Oxley Cannabis Group in 2017, and now he serves as the COO to Purecolo, keeping businesses running through power failures. And he's also the CEO of Psychometrics, a company focused on unlocking the potential of human capital. He's a proud member of Mensa, a top 40 under 40 honoree from the Ottawa Chamber of Commerce, and most importantly, father of 8 and a proud grandfather. James, welcome, sir. Good to have you back. Favorite quote to say you want to share with us, sir?
The favorite quote is, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." Wayne Gretzky, as quoted by Michael Scott. Sometimes the best wisdom hits when you're served with a smile. I try to keep that balance of perspective on what I'm trying to achieve and a little bit of humility in how I get the wisdom. I used to hang out in the hot tub with one of my sons. We would talk business. He was going into business administration at Algonquin. He wanted to build a software game online. We had some great conversations. He said he got more out of those hot tub conversations than he was getting out of Algonquin. But honestly, I got just as much out of them, because sometimes when you try to explain something to somebody, you have to understand it pretty profoundly to be able to break it apart into, mouth-sized bites. And yeah, business is tough for a reason.
Area, it's almost like the Karate Kid, right? If you explain the steps, being a black belt explaining to a white belt, right? It just reinforces what works and brings it in focus. Growth is really important, whether it's a plant in your field or your business. What do people misunderstand about growth, though? If I water my plant, I water the lawn, I'm going to get more lawn, apparently. Some days, maybe not all the time. But what do people misunderstand in the business space?
There is a couple things that people misunderstand. One, the idea that growth is easy, just go out and do it. And sometimes it belies all that work that has to happen in the background. Do you have scalable processes so that if you get N+1 customers, you can actually handle that and not all of a sudden fall apart? I mean, reputation really, really matters. So if you're doing something similar to somebody else, like web design, management consulting, you built a widget. What separates you from other people hopefully isn't just price, because someone else could just do it for less. Hopefully you're delivering something of quality, you're delivering something that matters, you're giving good service along with it. So, you don't want to fall on your butt when you're trying to deliver that thing that your business is relying on, and you've grown just a little bit too fast that you don't have processes that go with it. Another thing people misunderstand when they hear growth is that it all has to be on your shoulders. The big thing people forget when you're growing is that you're growing with a team. As you start bringing on those extra team members, you're thinking not only what can they do for me today, because I have work that has to get done, but how can they grow with me in the future? There's a company I know does really, really great work. He's had people working with his company for 15 years. They've been through the start of the scale of the business as the projects got more complex and more of them were coming down. You really build a lot of confidence as a leader if you're trying not to always think just of yourself, but you're thinking about the team around you. And that makes it a little bit easier. Tell you what, we're going to go hunting dinosaurs. You guys sharpen the pointy sticks. I'm going to get the big bag, and we're going to get someone else to pack all the food so we can go hunting. Many hands make that work lighter. So I think that's something that people try to forget, is that they're trying to grow always by themselves without thinking about how to involve other people in that vision of growth and how they can participate in that growth together.
I'll remember when I go dinosaur hunting next time. You bring that.
Yeah,
Bring the
James, there's a term that gets thrown around that I don't think many people understand as much as use: bootstrapping. What does that mean to you? And if it does involve doing everything yourself, how do you keep from getting burnt out?
So bootstrapping, the way I typically think of that in the businesses that I do, it's more about financial bootstrapping. That's the way people most often look at it. On the financial bootstrapping side, the idea is to never have to put so much money into a business that you're really doing a large investment round and selling a large portion of your shares to somebody else. You're really doing it more with blood, sweat, tears, and sometimes a little bit of cash, but you're doing it in the organic way of identifying, what is my business plan? What's my model? Who's my early adopter customers? Who are the next customers I want to get after that? And kind of stepping through and starting to build the revenue, and then using the proceeds of selling the first couple widgets to fund more growth. Now, there's pros and cons. Bootstrap, you keep a lot of control, but it takes time. So if you want to grow quick, gonna have more gunpowder in the barrel, so to speak, to push through and expand quickly, because you can see opportunities sometimes that you just can't take advantage of because you needed an extra 2 or 3 people working on the team. Let's say a software project where they need something delivered in 2 months, and yeah, it'd be a multi-million-dollar project, but I mean, it's just me and my friend doing all the work. I'd be working 18 hours a day for 2 months straight and still not be able to get the job done. If only I could bring on 1 or 2 more people, then we'd have more hands. But to do that, I'm going to have to give them some kind of consideration. So that segues into the other side of it, which is the resource management and load management side. We started up Psychometrics. There were a group of us, and we looked across the table and said, I think we can do this. We took on no outside investment as we started the development. One person doing database work, one person working on mathematical formulas, one person doing the marketing and graphics. I was the lucky jerk that ended up having to do some of the coding because someone had to do it. There were absolutely 18 to 20-hour days during the months of the high peak development that we needed to do. We were working with a deadline and making a presentation to the Capital Angel Network and wanted to get something done in time for our next meeting. This was during COVID. Schools had been shut down, so kids were learning from home. I remember waking up with my daughter about 7:30, 7:45 in the morning to get her up and check on the other kids, making sure she was online at, I think it had to be 8:05 at the kitchen table, and the kids were, different places. And then I would go into the office and I would start developing, coding, adding on another feature or 2 or 3 that we needed to get done quick. Sometimes when you're developing or building something, it goes really smooth and you get a lot done. Sometimes you hit snags, and so it slows down the progress, but you got to get through the snag to move on to the next item in the list. I'd code, take a break for lunch, check at the kids, take another slash at coding for a while, take another break, have dinner, spend a bit of time with the kids, get back, do more coding. Sometimes I'd be done 11, 12 o'clock at night, but sometimes it'd be 2 or 3 in the morning because there's one feature that was almost done. It just had one thing, and I could see what the problem must be, and it was just a matter of getting through it, save the code, upload, go off to bed at 2 or 3 in the morning, and then get back up again at 7:30, 7:45, and do it all over again. That takes a lot. I think it's like holding your breath. You can hold your breath for the first 5 or 10 seconds, no problem. Hold your breath for 30 seconds. By the 29th, 30th second, it starts getting harder. How many more seconds can you keep holding your breath is the game you play with kids when you're swimming or singing or doing anything that requires it. I think entrepreneurship can be like that too. It takes something out of you to do that. You could draw strength from the goal, from the project, from the team that can fuel you. You grab strength from your family, from the support, from the kids, from your parents, your neighbors, that can fuel you. But at some point, there has to be a limit on how long you can hold your breath under that kind of weight before you have to accept humans have limits. So let me pause, take a breath, and get back at it the next day.
Almost the way you're describing is if you're going to become a pearl diver, you get good, you can probably do a 2-minute, 3-minute hold. So that's a practice makes perfect piece. One element, as you were describing, you're adding that one more element. It's almost like you're in the forest. You can see the trees, but you can't see the forest. This is kind of more in a general scope question. How do you know if that task that you started is still worthy of that weight of attention? Let's have someone stepping back. I think being a project manager, right?
Yeah.
Task this, shovel the driveway from the snow, right? But is there something more important, or is there something you should be doing differently? Or is that snow going to melt by tomorrow morning? In which case, don't bother shoveling it.
First of all, I love the example. I've had that exact same conversation. We had that thing where it was snowy one day, freezing rain overnight, and then 19 degrees Celsius the next day. So are you really going to get out there and bust your butt shoveling that snow? Maybe you throw a handful of salt to make sure anyone coming up or down the stairs doesn't slip and fall. I mean, that's totally fair. But I wouldn't bust my butt on the snow. So the snow plows came, they cleaned out the driveway, and they did a real quick job because everybody needed their help, and they needed their help really quickly, and they started letting go some of their seasonal staff. And they kind of cut a corner a little bit as they were taking the snow off. I wasn't worried because it's going to be 19 degrees in like 2 days. Am I really going to be concerned because there's a couple extra feet of snow that technically they could have removed, but I don't have to remove either because Mother Nature will take care of it. So I think of these 3 fundamental things that a good entrepreneur needs to have: passion, persistence, and perception. You need to draw strength from something. You need to be able to speak passionately about it. If you can stand in front of investors and convince them to give you their money and trust. You can stand in front of a customer and convince them to sign a contract on something that is early. Maybe there's a competitor that does 80% of it, but you do something a little bit more. You convince them of that. You need that passion to do it. And you need to be able to inspire passion in the rest of the team as well and draw on theirs when you need it. You need persistence because there are going to be long days. There's going to be times where you're not sure what the answer is, and it's not always clear. That ability to stick the hands on the keyboard for 10 more minutes and realize I had forgotten a quote in one line of code. And that's all it took. By printing out a whole bunch of variables, all of a sudden I saw where the script broke. I took a look and I saw it there. Click. Delete it, and everything was fine. And if you gave up 5 minutes earlier, you wouldn't have missed that very simple fix. And you need the perception to see when is that right time. There are a lot of businesses that try to push forward with a bad product or a bad go-to-market strategy, or bad pricing model, or bad something. You need to know the difference between when it's time to keep pushing and when it's time to change and adapt. That falls a lot on intuition, but you can fix it by good communication. And people are sometimes afraid of asking their customers, what are we doing wrong? They try to just take their money and go. But if you ask them what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong, you may get some valuable information. Talk to the rest of the team, communicate. What are we doing better? What are we doing worse? Even talking to friends and family, and sometimes they won't always understand as well as you do because you're knee deep in the project, right? No one else can see the mud as clearly. But sometimes that little conversation in the hot tub at 9 o'clock at night is all you need to get that perspective of, maybe I need to be thinking about this problem from a different direction.
A quick sponsor message. Got a mug in hand? Good, because freshly brewed coaching is best served with your favorite roast. Join Wayne Pratt and Matt Hawksley as they spill the beans on how everyday pros, just like you, can use real coaching tools to level up their careers, teams, and mindset. It's bold, it's real, it's freshly brewed. Grab your free shot of clarity at freshlybrewedcoaching.com.
20 years ago, when we actually had newspapers, you used to go and turn to the business section and there was mergers and acquisitions. And this one was trying to buy this one, and this one was trying to buy that one. It seemed to usually be somebody trying to justify his existence. What do you find is, if maybe either side of the puzzle, when is a bad acquire, and how do you know you're being acquired by the wrong people?
Geez, that's tough. I think
Tasted, right?
people always want to be a CEO. I mean, that's the mark of success for every young entrepreneur. But when you actually are a CEO and you do have that control, you realize how complex and fractured that destiny is and the incredible load of responsibility and obligation that goes along with it. Purecolo is a great example. We incorporated technically in 2014. We officially signed our lease, got our investment, and got our first customers in 2017. And we've been growing ever since then. Through that journey, there have been a number of people that have seen what we've been doing and saying, hey, I would love to acquire you, add you, take you, massage you, do whatever, take advantage of that opportunity for myself in some way that I think you can't. Maybe because I have more money, put more marketing dollars, a change of strategy. Maybe I can use your service in a way that you're not thinking. We've had a number of different conversations with different groups over the years about acquisition or partnership that could turn into something more or something less, and you never know. I think you have to go in with one hand on the steering wheel of optimism, saying, yes, we can control our future. I'm optimistic. We can work together and find an opportunity to do something. And the other hand on the gear stick to say, up the clutch, go back into park here because this direction is not working. So the obligation that comes as a CEO comes from having to wear multiple hats. You have a fiduciary responsibility, a responsibility to the investors in the company, to the shareholders, to do what is in their best interest. And that can sometimes conflict with your obligation as a CEO to do what's right for the company. And that can also conflict with your obligation as a person, as a shareholder, as an individual who has bills to pay. Holy crap, we have someone who wants to buy the company that quickly. That could be really good for me personally, but they want to change the direction of the company, and the reputation that the business will have is going to change because it's just going to get absorbed into, let's say, a huge mothership. My shareholders will be happy if it comes in this way, but not in this other way. So there's all these different obligations that sometimes battle. I think the best thing you can do is try to think through each of those hats. If you can get a yes, this is good from the perspective of the shareholders, which is the obligation you have fiduciarily, from the company and the customers, that it's a good thing for them, and it's a good thing for yourself. You can't always put everybody else in front. Sometimes you do have to respect your own interests because eating is habit forming, as my dad always said. I think that's when you can get the best decisions of that acquisition partner. Sometimes I think people are afraid to ask questions during the process. And I've gone through with Purecolo, had a number of really interesting partnership conversations. And these are sometimes people looking to just wholesale what we do, or they're in a different geographical market and want to penetrate the market we're in, so we'll work together, or they're doing something that we don't do, but both could help a single customer together. So maybe we could partner and help a customer collaboratively more than we could on our own. Working with Reiner, he often starts these conversations where I'm thinking the first thing we want to do is get a deal. Is there a deal here? If we're talking about partnership, where do you see this going? How far down the road can we get? Are you willing to acquire? Is that price going to be realistic? He starts asking these basic questions like, why do you want to do this? Why are you here? And it's those moments where I think, yeah, that's a really good question. That's a really good question to ask right now, to get that perspective, to know what is the narrative? What is the story? What am I going to tell my employees and customers, the company, if this is a good deal or not? And what am I going to tell my shareholders and investors? Is this a good deal or not? So it's been kind of remarkable through some of those conversations that even when you think you have all the gray hair in the world and you know all the stories, you can still sit back and be schooled, realizing, yeah, that was a really good question to ask. Why is this happening?
You've tweaked on something. The choice is your personal choice, your business choice, your stakeholder choice, your customers, which can be stakeholders. I'm going to touch on a topic that's a little outside this, but in the same boat without actually getting into names. You see south of the border, this monolith of a corporation that has its hands in several pots: AI, automotive, space exploration. Then you see a personality coming out of that. Again, yay or nay, any elements in here. What do you have to be mindful if you're running a company, right? You're supposed to be below the radar. We were just talking to a realtor earlier today doing a podcast. He says, key thing is, I'm not front and center. Your house is, the sale is, then I become front and center. So how do you position yourself? And I get it, right? That's like, good luck all the way around for everybody. But how do you position yourself as an entity? And let's say you don't have that extreme personality type, or maybe you do, but how do you position yourself when you're running a business? Everything is kind of running on course. Like, you're maybe looking to sell the business at some point in time, expand, well, all those other elements. But how do you position yourself as the human being in the center of this?
The first thing I'll say, I have a lot of respect for anybody that wants to go into the political theater, because you have to put yourself out there in such a way, you have to take such risks that no matter what you say, somebody somewhere will find something wrong about it. So you have to have some kind of bulletproof emotional armor to go through those kinds of conversations and know that people will find fault no matter what. I'll focus on Canada because we can. Liberal Party, Conservative, Le Bloc, NDP, Green, doesn't matter. Anyone who's willing to raise their hand up and try to serve their community, try to serve their country, I have a lot of respect for. I can only imagine from the business world, the toll that can take, how that 24/7 media onslaught could affect you. I will give kudos to them all. I will not serve public office. I can't imagine. I'll start by saying we talk a lot about companies grow. We talk a lot about the goal of the company, but the fact that it's still being made out of people, and those people still have an emotional gas tank. And I try to put a lot into giving strength to myself, to my team, to keep doing what we're doing. There are obviously different personality types when it comes to business leaders. You will find, like all characteristics, it's on a spectrum, it's on a bell curve. Business leaders, at least on the successful side, tend to have 3 characteristics. And I'll draw a little bit from psychometrics because we did a lot of research on this. Psychologists around the world. So this is cross-culturally true. So it's not just Canada, it's quite universal. Successful leaders in business typically have high intelligence. They typically have high conscientiousness. If they commit to something, they're going to follow through and get it done. They typically have low agreeableness. You always think leaders are 10s across the board on everything, but they're not. They do have to have leadership capability and the ability to communicate and work with others, of course. That ability of agreeableness is sometimes the ability to stand there and say, in front of an onslaught of people saying, no, you can't do this. No, I don't believe in you. No, you're going to fail, to say, thank you very much. I appreciate your opinion. I will stick it there in the trash can and keep doing it because I know I'm right, even if you can't see it yet, because maybe I'm closer to this problem or I spent more time researching it than you. Try to bring it back to the business context. Looking at people who become political leaders, they typically come from a highly successful career as something. Maybe they were successful lawyers or successful economists or things like that, where they've done something or successful in the political sphere from a young age, where they've kind of kept on a career and really got well. So there's something that they've had where they've had to face a lot of onslaught and still stand there saying, go on, I'm still ready to disagree with you. And so that takes something special. I think for a leader, I think you need to have some amount of extroversion, because at some point you're going to have to be comfortable talking to other people, and it can be draining. It's okay that it's draining. Sometimes the introvert part, that they can do it, it just drains them more. Extroverts can do it and they tend to get more power from it. As long as you can do it, that's what matters. Going to networking events, sitting in a room full of business people, shaking hands and realizing that is a potential customer. I'm going to have to start a conversation right now with them. I wasn't expecting to, so let's go do it. That kind of spur of the moment action without planning. So I think that tends to be the case. I think it helps as a leader if you are able to stand in front and put yourself as part of the company. But you're right that there's a line there about it being the company, not the personal brand. So I always try to put the company first, company first, company first. When I got the Top 40 Under 40 award, they brought us all into a meeting at Ottawa U. I think everyone was there, 38, 39, maybe of the 40 people who won were there. And there was a presentation about a brand marketing specialist. I'm a successful person. I know how to build a business. It's okay, but I'm open. I'm happy to have the conversation. And they talked about this tennis player who's really, really, really good at what they did, and an absolute turd ball in the media. He was just very argumentative, and the press would cover him negatively because of that. And so he was having a lot of friction. He met with a brand marketing specialist, and they gave him a different piece of advice. Market yourself, because you're going to be doing something after, and you don't know what the future is going to hold. So keep doing what you're doing, but understand there is a world that comes after whatever that is. So there's a world that comes after parenting. There's a world that comes after the business. There's a world that comes after whatever the interest may be. And, this tennis player took the advice. They started kind of changing just a little bit about how they were wording what they were saying. They said the same message, just slightly different. And suddenly everybody liked them, and they started getting more brand deals, whether it's tennis, Adidas, some kind of shoe contract for their efforts. And I think that makes sense in the business context, because you do want to understand that you have a brand, you have a reputation to uphold. Because at some point when you're sitting at a table negotiating, they're looking at you in your eyes to know, can I trust this person? Can I believe this person in order to sign an agreement with them? So if you keep in mind there's a life after business, probably helps in a couple other ways as well.
Jim, something you touched on that I want to drill in on. You mentioned visionary leadership. The most obvious example is Apple, where you had Steve Jobs, truly a visionary. But the other hand, you have someone like Tim Cook, who could get that iPod into your hands. Totally different skill set.
Totally different.
These are usually different people. Have you met a couple you can brag about that they're the same? Or usually the brilliant, argumentative visionary is not the disciplined operation guy?
I could not imagine a better pairing in business than Steve Jobs and Tim Cook. All due respect for Wozniak, but Jobs was possibly the best presenter, promoter I've ever seen. I will still watch presentations that he's done, like the first presentation of the iPhone, classic in marketing, when he was basically booted forcefully out of Apple and stubbornly kept one share because I want access to the finances. I want access to the reports. I'm still going to keep one share. And then came back in, and he did basically, like, I think they even jokingly called him the ICEO, interim CEO, but at that point, it fit in with the kind of names that are going for the products. He did this famous presentation where he sat on stage talking, and a tech raised his hand and asked, "What are you doing here? You don't know anything about technology or coding. So why are you even opening your mouth? Shouldn't you just listen to us?" He could sit there on stage with a really tough question, knowing the camera's still rolling, and came up with such a comprehensively articulated response to address their question and tell his story about, you're right, but we have to look at the future. There's a bigger picture here. And it was so perfect. So that, I think it takes a certain skill set. Obviously, you need intelligence. You need the ability to communicate. You need to feel really comfortable with discomfort, to sit on stage. And there's another famous presentation that Steve Jobs did. This was, I think maybe it was the iPad. He was doing a presentation kind of talking about some of the live things you could do. He was going to test a feature to demonstrate it. And the technicians in setting up the demo used the Wi-Fi of the building to gain network access for the device so they could use it. But there were so many people in the auditorium using the Wi-Fi that they were lagging the entire network. So he tried testing it and the demo was failing. And I don't know if he heard on an intercom in his ear or something, but basically he figured directly or indirectly that it was because the network was being slammed. So I'm going to wait right here until all you guys turn your stuff off and get off the Wi-Fi network. It's okay. I can wait. And that confidence to sit there and control a room when you're in the middle of a presentation, you know, camera flashes going, every word is being recorded. One of the company that's probably fighting the hardest trying to make its name, to sit there on stage and enjoy that moment. Oh, that is a special personality. But on the other side, Tim Cook, the scalability of production that Apple had to do when you would announce a product and people were 10 times more interested in it than you thought your projections expected that they should be. And you would do all the market research to try to figure out what is that level of interest? How does that turn into purchases? How does that turn into production and timelines? And let's go find all the partners to build all the different components that have to go in line and get connected together to make and assemble one phone, for example, and not just make it, but make it cost effectively and to a high degree of quality and to the right timeline. I mean, that's an incredibly intelligent mind. Also has to be an incredible communicator. But I don't know if Tim would feel as comfortable as Steve Jobs would in that moment of sitting on stage with somebody asking you, telling you, you don't know what you're talking about, and turn it into a quintessential presentation and answer moment. I don't know how Tim would handle that moment of soaking in the crowd, waiting, watching as people are turning phones off, saying, don't worry, I'll keep waiting, and let the seconds tick. I mean, that's special. I have a huge amount of respect for Tim Cook, as I think anybody who manages any business operation should. And clearly he has continued doing a phenomenal job of growing that company to one of the biggest companies on the planet. So anyone who would like to argue with that, go argue with a stock exchange. Don't bother arguing with us. But is there a difference between those two? I think there is. And I think something about visionary, something about comfort in the face of discomfort. I think those were skills that Steve Jobs, I don't know that Tim Cook had them, but I also think Tim Cook was probably far more conscientious and meticulous, maybe in a way that Steve Jobs wasn't.
As you're describing this, thinking of two things: grace under fire, calm, and confidence. So calm and confidence will be both gents. I think that the persona of Jobs versus Cook, you know, one enjoys the debate, the other one enjoys how puzzles come together.
The answer.
So it's interesting to see that, but in the right time, in the right place, because I believe Apple was lagging. That's why Jobs came back, if I'm not mistaken, right? And so you had to bring the horse into play. Well, the people metrics of this whole thing. And I'm going to touch on psychometrics now, because this seems like a perfect segue in our path of going through the flow here. What do you see when you're in a startup phase? You're looking to get everything coming together. You have a great idea because you've created the business. But at the same time, if you're the Cook personality and you need the Jobs personality, how do you either from inside the business, like, geez, I'm not that guy. I need that guy. The outside looking in, going, I'm looking to buy the company. How do you sort that out? Does psychometrics help you sort that out too?
Well, that was the genesis of psychometrics in the first place, is the investment thesis that we heard over and over again. I've been involved in a whole bunch of different companies. I've raised money for a number of different companies, and I've been fortunate to see a lot of those companies succeed and go into great things. When an investor says, I invest into teams, that's stuck in my craw. And I'll be honest, the first words I thought is, I'll say this delicately, that is bull doopucky. That makes no sense. That is incoherent word salad gibberish, even if only a few words, because you're investing in teams. Sure you are, but how are you making that decision? What's your metric? What's your analysis methodology? What's your quantitative reason why this one is worth investing in? You talk to someone who says, I invest in good business models. You can get accountants to look at a financial model and see the error rates and the gradient of trend that they're using in growth, or the costs they're anticipating for operations, and find flaws or strengths. And that's a rationale I can get behind. You say you invest into good corporate structures. You can get a lawyer to tear apart the shareholder agreement, to find wordings, to find gaps, to find exposure points and risk, and say, yeah, well, this one is solid. This one has holes. So we're going to have to rewrite this if we're going to invest into it. But this one we can take as is. You can absolutely do that because there's experts that are really good at those skills. But if you're investing into teams and you're walking into a room just using intuition, you're looking for a gut feeling, it didn't make sense. So the idea was to find a way of quantifying those things by looking at more than just one dimension of an individual, but try to look at the same individual through multiple dimensions of data collection, with all that data back in the platform at the same time. And then if I can collect data on you, I can have data on multiple people at the same time. And now I can see how some of that data interacts with each other, personality type, competencies, things like that. That was fascinating to us. And really what created the passion and the drive for us doing this in the first place was looking and seeing, if you have that management team and you have to go and raise money to bring on a CFO, what traits should that CFO have to best complement the existing bench of traits that you have in your team already, to augment, make it better? That's where we came from. That's why we did it. I'm taking this down to the example of how would I do the next project. The alternative is taking risks and doing your best guess and trying to structure something that may have problems, but if there's a good legal agreement, we can minimize the risk of those problems. It's not a great answer. Another alternative, I'm going to just interview people more. I'm going to interview this candidate, not one time, not twice, but Christ, 4, 5, 6, 7. Someone's got to do that joke. Interviewing someone through 4 or 5 different or 6 levels of interviews before you come in. And yeah, you could probably weed out some people that way. We found in the first stage, they couldn't communicate clearly. They couldn't articulate themselves and their thoughts. So we let them go. We found out in the second stage that they didn't have the depth of knowledge we were hoping to have on the subject matter that needed them to be expert at. So we let them go. We found out in the third stage, they couldn't apply that knowledge into practice. So we let them go. On the fourth stage, we found that they burped when they drank tea or coffee. You start running out of valuable things you can keep driving out. And on the other side, if somebody is good, they are talented, how long are they going to be available? Will they recognize that talent in themselves? Will they go through 4, 5, 6, 7 levels of interviews before they say, look, I like you. I like what you're doing, but you got to make a decision here. I'm not comfortable doing a constant merry-go-round set of interviews, interviewing every person in the company, one person at a time, one interview at a time. That could be tough. That could be wearing. So I think if you're able to get a better view of people at the outset, you can save a lot of time early. And in this case, time and missed opportunities is money.
James, here's the crystal ball part of the session. You see a lot of data, a lot of metrics, to use your language. What should business owners be focusing on in growth channels or innovations? What should small business be looking at right now that's being under the radar?
I think a lot of people hire the wrong way. I think a lot of people hire for hard skills, the skills that could be learned, the skills that could be taught, but the skills that are also required to do the job. Don't dispute. Somebody needs to be able to get a job done. Absolutely, of course. But I think they forget to look at those soft skills where this person responds with adversity by withdrawing, pulling away from others, trying to do everything themselves. They're not able to, but they continue to withdraw as a result of that. Maybe it's anxiety, temperament, characteristic. And so they end up going through the spiral of failing and not being able to get themselves out of a failure cycle. That would be nice to find out. This other candidate, maybe they respond to aggression poorly. Maybe they respond to conflict poorly. Wouldn't it be nice to know that? So before you interact with them, I'm not going to raise my voice. Not that you should have an excuse for going around telling people they're a bunch of jerks in the workplace, of course, but to know how to handle people a little bit differently. To know with person A, they like fact-driven conversations. So I'm going to lay out a series of facts and start walking through the other person. Maybe they need to see the big picture. They need to see that the vision is big enough, that the picture is worth the effort and energy to pursue, and then make sure that there are facts and behind it afterwards. So if you can find out some of those things, that would be phenomenal, especially for some roles. I mean, if you're hiring for a customer service role, you probably want to know that the person you're hiring has customer service experience, but what's their temperament like? How do they handle and approach conflict? How are they on the phone if somebody tells them, 7 other people have told me to reboot my router. I'm not doing it again. I don't trust you guys. I've been on that call. I have had that experience and that temperament to be able to tell them, you're absolutely right. However, conditions have just changed. There's a variable that you may not know. Something's changed on our network. I would like you to reboot your router one more time for me, please. And to convince them to do that in order to resolve the problem. And yes, miracles happen. The problem gets fixed and holy smokes, you look like the superhero, but you never would have gotten that opportunity without the temperament. So hard skills, important to get the job done. Soft skills are the ones that allow the job to get done just as much.
Your time machine may be somewhat flawed. If you could imagine yourself 3 to 5 years out, where would you like to be?
I know exactly where I want to be. And maybe that's a difference between people who have a lot of experience with entrepreneurship. You're so used to dealing with uncertainty because you make a plan, you have a mental map where you're going to be 2, 3 steps down, because every day do one thing to make the business better. One step is the first step, most important one in that marathon, in that journey of 1,000 miles. 3 to 5 years, I will be on a beach. I will be surrounded by my kids, relaxing and enjoying the sun, because I will have continued growing and scaling one of my businesses and taking calculated, mitigated risks to do that. Never trying to sprint before I can run, never running before I can walk, but never being afraid of taking the first step to walk, to start exploring something. So I'll give you an example. Purecolo is beginning growth. We have done a remarkable job of growing within the Ottawa area. We're so proud. We've worked really hard doing what we do. We worked hard at hours that our customers may not even know of to make sure that maintenance windows are carried out, to make sure that designs are being planned and engineered correctly, to make sure that equipment's being installed correctly, wires pulled, air conditioners coiled and mechanically attached, and all sorts of things that people may not care about that go on behind the scenes. But we really care about it passionately, and we're so proud of the growth that we've had. It would be great to help customers in more areas. Data centers are one of those things that tend to be geographical, like a hospital, where you will get people traveling from afar. We have customers from the opposite side of the US that have been in our data center once, maybe 2 years ago, but they've been a customer for 5 years. So it's not always geographically bound, but it tends to be the point. So we're starting to explore new geographical markets. And as we're doing that, it has to be with the same meticulous approach that we've done our first data center. Where can I find space that works? What's the math look like? Where's the money going to come from? Are there customers there? Have I talked to any of them? Have the customers agreed that the price I want to charge is a price they're willing to pay? If I can get this going, how long is it going to take? Is it going to be ready in advance of my customer saying, I need it by this date or else? Or do I have a timing issue? It's those kinds of care that we put into the plan in the same way we put in the execution we've done already, that we're starting to put into now in some new markets. And it's really exciting. I'm going on a trip in just a few days. I'm going to be gone for a week and a half. I'm going to miss my kids. They're my life. They power me through all those dark moments, those difficult days of, I don't know if I can pull this off or not, but they're the reason I do what I do. So I'll have my calls with them. Don't worry. I'm sure we're going to be texting through the day and sending pictures and calls. But while I'm doing those meetings, I'm going through all that set of questions. Where have I identified something as a fact versus an assumption? How do I gather the proof that my assumption is correct and therefore now is a fact? Or does it stay on the veil of assumption? How many assumptions do I still have as we unfold the details of this model, this business model, the kind of execution plan? How many of them stay behind the veil of assumption? How many can I drag over to facts? And then how do those facts line up together? How long is the shadow that those facts cast? And does that make a plan work? It ain't going to work. I have to charge the customers more than they're willing to pay to make my model work. Better to find out now in planning than after 2 or 3 years of trying to run a business and grind at it to realize I can never charge my customers enough money to make the business viable. That's a terrifying place to be.
James, luckily enough, they won't be able to see this interview until you're actually back from Brazil. But if they want to talk to you, how do they get a hold of you?
Easiest way to get a hold of me is on LinkedIn. There's not many James Mackenzies. Certainly nobody is as tall as me. I would always say happy to connect on LinkedIn. I'm always involved in projects. I try to give back my time where I can, especially in the community, and always happy to help.
Say thank you to James Mackenzie, my co-host Wayne Pratt, and you, the Knack for Business listeners. If you found this intriguing, this conversation of getting a business up and running, viability, there's a lot more to this, a lot of depth and breadth. We've just kind of like a skipping stone across the water, we've bounced across with some depth to it. Reach out to James, have a chat. You might have a business space that he might be able to help you. You might be able to help him, or it's just a good conversation.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVINSIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motive8u.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter U.ca, or his website, motive8u.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people. Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert. Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host. Jovan Strika from At Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space. Then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner. And Wayne Pratt from Motive 8U Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer, please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.